Weilà raga, how's it going everybody? Welcome to this lesson in our series of videos, Zero to Hero Italian Grammar Series, where we're looking at all things Italian from the most basic, working our way up to the most advanced topics. Today we're going to be looking at something fairly advanced. The condizionale is always a bit on the advanced side, and today we're looking at the past conditional. So be sure to have checked out our video on the present conditional because that is going to be really foundational for mastering this topic. So without further ado, here we are at our digital whiteboard. We're going to be covering today the famous Condizionale Passato. Very nice. This is going to be a compound verb form. This is used when you want to say that you would have, should have, or could have done something. All right. Very, very important. So it's basically things that you now no longer can change. That usually tends to be the case here. All right, so let's take a look at some of our fundamentals here. So we're going to need avere and essere as our auxiliary verbs. You're also going to need potere and dovere as modal verbs. Because if you guys recall from our lesson on the condizionale presente, in the condizionale, potere is used to mean could, dovere is used to mean should. There is no word for would in Italian. You simply just conjugate any verb using the condizionale verb endings, and that's how you arrive at would. And yeah, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Let's begin with would, just as we did in our condizionale presente video. We're going to be saying everything that you would have. So we will begin with avere and essere. They will be in their condizionale presente forms. Okay, let's take a look at the verb parlare, for example. Parlare means to talk, and we're going to look at this as would have talked, or I'm going to use it as spoken because it also has that meaning. So we're going to look at parlare as would have spoken today. Okay, here is the conjugation. We have io avrei parlato. So what did we do? Let's explain the steps. We have parlare in its participio passato form. That means it's past participle form. And then we have here avere used as an auxiliary verb in its condizionale presente form. Let's write that here. So this is condizionale presente form. And then we have parlare in its participio passato form, which is the past participle form. That's how we get to spoken. Very nice. Let's continue on with this conjugation, shall we? Tu avresti parlato. That means you would have spoken. Lui, lei, avrebbe parlato. He, she, or it would have spoken. Noi avremmo parlato. We would have spoken. Voi avreste parlato. You all would have spoken. Loro avrebbero parlato. So for example, we can say avrei parlato molto italiano con te, ma purtroppo ero troppo stanco. So, what does this mean? I would have spoken a lot of Italian with you, but unfortunately, I was too tired. There we go. So, avrei parlato, I would have spoken. There we go. This is the foundation. Once you have this, you can say anything you would have done. You would have done anything. But we are going to look at essere, because anytime we use essere, we have to pay attention to gender and number agreement, and obviously our main verbs are going to be different. We're going to be using main verbs that require essere, such as andato, so andare rather. So let's use andare to say would have gone. Okay, andare. We're going to say io sarei andato. It can also be andata if the person who is speaking, this would be the first person singular, I, is female. Io sarei andato or andata. I would have gone. Now, tu saresti andato. Or yet again, if you're female, it's going to end in an a. Lui sarebbe andato. This one is just going to end in o because it's lui. Lei sarebbe andata. This one is just going to end in a because it's lei. Noi, I was going to say siamo. Noi saremmo andati or andate. Then we have voi sareste andati or andate. And loro sarebbero andati or andate. So, for example, if I wanted to say saremmo andati in Italia, però abbiamo cambiato, let's say, piani. Okay. So this means we would have gone to Italy, but, or however, but we changed plans. You could also say programmi. That's very common as well. Programmi, which means plans. So, saremo andati. We would have gone. All we did was we took andare, put it in its participio passato form. It has to be plural because we're talking about a group of people. And our helping verb is in the noi form because we're talking about us. And it's in its conditional, its present conditional form, the condizionale presente, because this is the conditional, and that's how it gets used. There we go. And of course, I always reiterate this, even though we say have in English, that's the only auxiliary we use. In Italian, they happen to have two, avere and essere, and they have a different function. But the meaning is always the same, that we would have gone. Nice. Now, what happens, instead of saying would have done something, what if we want to say could or should have done something? If you recall from our lessons on the condizionale presente, we use potere and dovere. So now let's talk about that. So could have done. Let's use actually the verb for done, which is fare. And we're also going to say should have done, but let's do could first. They work identically. We just have one verb that changes the whole situation. So this uses fare. So let's do fare, which is to do or to make. In the past, it is done. So io avrei. So this is what we were doing before. We take the helping verb and we put the helping verb, also called the auxiliary verb, in its condizionale form. So that's all going to be the same. I'm actually going to do all the verbs like this first. I'm just going to stop here, okay? Fare takes avere as its helping verb. So lui, lei avrebbe. Let's start here. Noi avremmo. Okay, I know I'm just conjugating avere, but we're using it as an auxiliary. Just keep that in mind. There's more to come. Voi avreste. Loro avrebbero. Okay, now step 2. If we want to say could, what is the verb that we use to say could? Potere. Now, we're not going to put potere in the condizionale presente form because we already have a whole set of verbs already in that form. Something is already in the condizionale. We don't say avrei, potrei. We don't say that. That sounds more like I would have, I could have, or I would have, I could. It kind of sounds like something like that. So, what do we do, though, after the auxiliary verb? What do we do up here, for example? Andare goes in its participio passato form. What happened to the verb before it? Parlare goes in its participio passato form when it's after the helping verb. That's what we're going to do with potere. So we're going to say potuto for all of these. Potuto. 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 Right now, what do all of these mean? I would, it doesn't mean anything. I would have, and the past tense of can is could. I would have could. It just doesn't work. There has to be something that comes after. But this is literal, okay? Literally what's going on at this point. We're not done yet. So I'm just going to get rid of all that. Okay. So now we need something after it. And now we're going to take done, the past participle of fare. So, avrei, well, actually, we don't even need the past participle of fare because something else is already in the past participle. So, just like with when we got to this stage, we're like, well, we can't put potere in the conditional because something else before it is already in the conditional. So now, what is our only option left? Keep the verb the way it is. Here you go. There you have it. Okay. So, what does any of this mean? This one at the top, I could have done. The next one, you could have done. He, she, it could have done. We could have done. You all could have done. They could have done. That's what all of that means. Let's put it in a sentence. Avrei potuto fare la foto, like I could have done the photo, or instead of photo, I always say avrei potuto fare let's say I compiti. I like using that. I could have done the homework. Avrei potuto fare I compiti, ma non avevo il tempo. So, let me put this in another color. Let's do blue, shall we? Okay. I could have done the homework, but I didn't have the time. Okay. Could have done the homework, but I didn't have the time. So, avrei potuto fare, I could have done. There we have it. So this is a departure from English. We don't use could as a modal, have as the auxiliary, and then the past participle that way. So in Italian, here's what we don't do. If this were to match up like perfectly with English, which it does not, we would say io potrei avere fatto. Io potrei avere fatto. Actually, I feel like that could work in some kind of context. That actually can work in some other context, I'm pretty sure. But my mind is just focused on condizionale passato, so I don't want to get too crazy with it. This is not what you do in Italian, but that is what would line up perfectly if things were similar to English. Instead, what we actually do is we say io avrei, we put the helping verb first, the auxiliary verb first. Then, whatever comes after the auxiliary verb always has to be in its participio passato form. It just so happens that we put potere next. So that's going to become potuto. And then, what comes after a verb when it's in its participio passato form? Nothing. You don't do anything to the verb. So this is a real functional thing. I would say if it doesn't make sense yet, which is totally fine if it doesn't, give it time and do a lot of repetition. So I'm actually going to leave this here, and let's move on to do dovere, because it's the same exact thing. All we're going to do for dovere, to say to should, instead of potuto here, you're going to do dovuto. That's the only difference. So let's do it with fare. Let's keep it with fare, okay? So we're going to say should have done. So we're going to use dovere. We're going to use dovere and fare. Okay. So, io avrei dovuto fare, which means I should have done. Now, let's do the same thing that we did before, okay? Conjugate avere first in the conditional. Lui, lei avrebbe, noi avremmo, voi avreste, loro avrebbero. Okay. Next, the verb that comes next has to be in its participio passato form. What does it just so happen to be? Dovuto. I'm going to put it all here so it's all lined up. V-U-T-O. Yeah, whoa, what happened? You know what? Actually, I don't like how it looks over there. Let's do dovuto fare. There we go. Dovuto fare. Dovuto fare. Dovuto fare. So as you can see, the fact that we're saying dovuto fare or potuto fare feels like it's not the most important thing, because what is indicating who's actually doing the action? The auxiliary verb. Loro avrebbero dovuto fare. So for example, avresti dovuto fare i compiti, ma non li hai fatti. What does this mean? You should have done the homework, but you didn't do them. There we have it. Avresti dovuto fare. Oops, that is not the right tasto. That's not the right key. You should have done. There you go. Avresti dovuto fare. Now, what happens when a verb requires essere? I'm going to show you that with one form of a verb, okay? We're going to use andare again. Remember, we always have to do gender and number agreement. So, let's do this. So, condizionale passato, which is past conditional. I think that's how it is in English. Yep. So this is going to use essere because andare uses essere as its helping verb. If we want to say, I would have gone. Remember, there's no verb for would in Italian. You're just going to conjugate the auxiliary in the conditional and call it a day. So, io sarei andato. the verb that comes right after the auxiliary will go in its participio passato form. And it's going to be O or A, just depending on the gender of the speaker in this case. I would have gone. I should. I would have gone. Sorry, I would have gone. The next is going to be I could have gone. Okay. Now, we do have a word for could in Italian, which is potere in the conditional, right? But remember, we're always using our auxiliary verb, which takes precedence, and that's going to be the thing that goes in the condizionale form. What comes right after an auxiliary verb? The participio passato form, the past participle form. Io sarei potuto or potuta. And then what comes after a verb in its participio passato form? We just don't conjugate the next verb. So I'm going to write this a little bit larger after we do should, because should is going to be the same thing, just swapping out one modal for the other. Io sarei, because I don't like how cramped this is. Dovuto, dovuta, andare. Okay. So now let's take a moment to show this with some more detail. Okay. If I say, for example, Maria, you would have gone to Italy, right? Let's say we want to ask her this question. We're going to say Maria. We're referring to a female. It's third person. But we're calling her tu, because we're saying you. So Maria, tu saresti andata in Italia, vero? You would have gone to Italy, right? Saresti andata. You would have gone. There's no word for would. Just take your auxiliary, put it in the conditional, and then you have your main verb after. Just agree it in gender and number. One person and it's a female. Now we want to say, Maria, you could have gone to Italy. We don't need to put in that right. So we're going to say, Maria. Without the tu, you could just say saresti, always beginning with that auxiliary verb in the conditional. What's the verb for could? Potere. Because something's already in the conditional, whatever comes after the auxiliary verb has to be in its participio passato form. And because we're using essere, we have to do gender and number agreement. Saresti potuta andare in Italia. And the final one, using could. Let's just, you could have gone. Let's just highlight that. Saresti potuta andare. So once again, Maria, you should have gone to Italy. Is going to be Maria, saresti dovuta andare in Italia. All right. You should have gone. Saresti dovuta andare. If we were using a group of people, we're saying saremmo. It's going to be saremmo andati. This is we would have gone. What about if I want to say we could have gone? Saremmo potuti andare. What about we should have gone? Saremmo dovuti andare. So I'm going to write the rule, and then that's it for today's lesson. This is everything. I would suggest watching this more than one time and writing everything down. So here are those rules just to reiterate them. Okay. the auxiliary verb, which is either avere or essere, will go in its condizionale form. So we're going to have something like, if we're using io, avrei or sarei. Then the verb that follows will be in its participio passato form. So it's past participle form, such as andato. If it happens to be could or should, it would be potuto or dovuto. And if we're talking about andare in this particular situation, we'd have to do gender and number agreement, okay? Then the third verb, if you need one, which you would only need one with saying could and should, not with would. There's only two verbs with would. So yeah, andato would also have to be gender and number agreement. The third verb will remain unconjugated. Unconjugated. Why can't I always remember? I can never remember, rather. Will remain unconjugated. So you would say something like andare after potere and dovere. So that's why we have, once again, we would say sarei andato or sarei andata. Could be an O at the end. We have sarei potuto or potuta andare. We have sarei dovuto or dovuta andare. If we're using a verb such as avere, where we don't need gender and number agreement, we would say something like avrei. We could say fatto. I would have done. Avrei potuto fare. I could have done. Avrei dovuto fare. I should have done. All right. So I'm going to leave it there. I think we laid out all the rules quite nicely. We even did some examples. Obviously, it's a very technical side of Italian. This is why we're now in advanced territory. The good news is that you're going to continue to see this as we progress. As we get into the congiuntivo, as we get into the periodo ipotetico, we're going to see this make a comeback. And sometimes seeing something not isolated, such as what we're doing now, today, can help. So seeing something in a different light, even later on, after you've had some time to sort of forget about it, can tend to help. So that's going to be it for today. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments section. Be sure to stay tuned for the videos that are to come and check out the videos that have already come. And that's it. Always remember to spread the love, guys, and I'll catch you on the next video. Ciao, ciao.